Xbox On. Hello and welcome to Xbox On, a podcast with one host about one console, the Xbox One. I am said host, Jesse DeRosa, and on today's episode, we'll be talking about the latest Xbox news for the week of August 22nd, 2019, including Halo Infinite's creative director has left 343 Industries. Another Xbox game is coming to Nintendo Switch. A whole lot of stuff just got announced during Gamescom 2019, and much, much more. So let's just get right in. I would just like to start off this week's episode by mentioning some PS4 news that happened this week that is actually kind of tangentially related to Xbox, and that is, of course, the big, massive news that is Sony acquiring Insomniac. This is, like I said, this is just really big news because Insomniac and Sony have kind of been really close partners since pretty much the beginning of both Insomniac and PlayStation's history. So, I mean, every Insomniac game up until Sunset Overdrive was either a PlayStation exclusive or just available on PlayStation at the very least in the case of games like Fuse. So this is just a massive get for Sony. People in the industry have said that Sony had for years tried to get Insomniac to come and be a Sony brand, but Insomniac insisted on being independent. But with that aside, what makes this news so notable for Xbox gamers is, of course, during Insomniac's kind of not so much a departure, but kind of their exploration away from that close relationship they have with Sony back in the early mid 2010s period. We saw them, partner with Microsoft at the beginning of the Xbox One generation to create Sunset Overdrive, which, for those who haven't played it, let me just say is easily the number one most underrated game on Xbox One, period. It's a console exclusive. If you haven't played this game and you own an Xbox One, you're doing yourself a massive disservice. But essentially, it's like this kind of smaller open world Tony Hawk's Pro Skater meets Ratchet and Clank game where you just like the traversal is insane and you just this fluid kind of Tony Hawk style of like running on walls, grinding on wires and stuff. And obviously that's not what you do in Tony Hawk, but it feels almost like skateboarding, yet you're moving on your feet. So actually, I would say the movement kind of feels like a combination of Titanfall meets Tony Hawk, but it's such a great game, and you get these crazy weapons that are very reminiscent of the kinds of guns you might find in Ratchet and Clank, and it's just such a blast of a game. But what does this mean for the future of Sunset Overdrive now that Insomniac is owned by Sony? Well, one might assume that's just it, and Sunset Overdrive is dead and gone. Now, it doesn't actually end just like that, because if you'll remember back to the early days when Insomniac decided to partner with Microsoft, the reason why they went with Microsoft in the Xbox One instead of PlayStation for the very first time as an exclusive game is because Sony wanted to own the IP of whatever property Insomniac next worked on. However, Insomniac wanted to own their own IP and therefore went to Microsoft because Microsoft allowed Insomniac to hold and keep the rights to Sunset Overdrive if they were to make and release that game exclusively on Xbox. So that being said, this is where things get a little fuzzy. I believe Microsoft owns the rights to publish the first Sunset Overdrive game on console. So basically what that means is it can't be released on PlayStation 4, but because Insomniac still owns the IP itself, that wouldn't stop them from being able to make, say, a Sunset Overdrive 2, which would be a PlayStation 4 exclusive or PlayStation 5 exclusive, whatever. But maybe, I don't know, maybe there's something I don't know about where Insomniac can actually re-release the first Sunset Overdrive on PlayStation. Maybe that's somehow included in this acquisition. I don't know. But I think this is just important because, Sunset Overdrive, even though it didn't sell like crazy and it doesn't leave like a huge legacy behind it for the Xbox community, it's just a really underrated game that I think critics really adored and people who did play it really adored. And it's just really, I think, an important game, especially to the early history of the Xbox One, which is an important time when Xbox wasn't as favorably viewed as it had been prior, or even how it is now. So it's just, I don't know. It was, in my opinion, the brightest thing happening in the world of Xbox in a very dark time for Xbox history, and it's just sad to see that now it looks like there's no hope for a future of Sunset Overdrive, at least on Xbox. However, if you are a fan of the game, it looks like maybe there is a future for the game on Sony's hardware, but you never know. The man, his name escapes me now, but the guy at Insomniac who kind of shepherded the idea of Sunset Overdrive actually no longer works at Insomniac because he went to work for Microsoft at the Initiative, that new quadruple A studio that Microsoft is gearing up with a new game they just formed in Santa Monica. So a little bit of a long-winded one, but I just wanted to start off this week by mentioning some PlayStation news that actually kind of ties into some Xbox history and potentially some Xbox news. So that's an interesting one. And of course, as someone who's a massive fan of Insomniac, I would say, despite being an Xbox fan, Insomniac is easily top 3 favorite game developers of all time for me. The Ratchet & Clank games are super special to me. Resistance is a great shooting game. I used to love the Spyro games as a kid, and of course, Sunset Overdrive is one of my favorite Xbox One exclusives. It's probably right up there with Halo 5 and maybe, I don't know, Quantum Break. But yeah, if you haven't played that, let Sony's acquisition of Insomniac be an excuse for you to finally delve into that incredible game that is Sunset Overdrive, if you have not done so already. And now with that long-ass housekeeping kind of quasi news story out of the way, let's jump into the actual Xbox news for this week. All right, let's start this week with the biggest Xbox news story to have dropped in quite a while, and that is that Tim Longo, creative director of Halo Infinite, has left 343 Industries with roughly 1 year left until the game's launch. Longo served as the creative director on Halo 5, and before that, he led as the creative team lead behind Star Wars Republic Commando, which I think released sometime around 2005. It's one of the more well-received Star Wars games. However, the campaign with Halo Infinite will continue to be developed now under the leadership of Mary Olson, who is the executive producer. However, in response to Kotaku, 343 reached out responded to a question and said that, quote, the overall creative vision and production of the game remains led by Chris Lee, the studio head of Halo Infinite. And so this is, this story kind of like, lit the internet on fire. It did one of those this game's screwed. Halo Infinite's in bad condition. Halo isn't as good as it used to be. 343 doesn't know what they're doing. Yada yada yada. That kind of bullshit. And if you could really drown out the noise and think about this story seriously for a minute, you'll see that really the way 343 kind of structures their studio is a little different from a traditional game studio. And it seems like I'm not trying to say that Tim Longo's role as creative director wasn't important by any means, because of course, a title like creative director is extremely important. However, I don't think this is the kind of role where like this guy had the vision and was running the whole thing and then decided to leave in the middle of development and now the studio's screwed. I believe 343, I don't see this as kind of a PR like cover up to make this look less bad by saying Chris Lee, the studio head of Halo Infinite, is overall doing the creative vision for the product. I really think there's a lot of truth to that, and that there is a collective kind of vision and idea for what Halo Infinite is supposed to be, and there's no way I see this being like one man's specific vision for the game. That also being said, games in their final year, this is coming from someone who knows jack squat about how video games are made. But from what I can gather anecdotally, it seems like in the last year of development, you have your story down, you have these kinds of things done. Games really come together in terms of creating the levels and all these things. And so it's like, I think at this point, they have the general synopsis of what this game is and what kind of the main beats of the game are. And rather now it's more of, the technical fidelity and building the game and kind of making it all work together and changing it from like some storyboarded jumbled mess of technology and turning it into a coherent and cohesive like final product of a game. But we never know. They spent so much of these past 5 years making Halo Infinite, building this slip space engine. So who's to say how far along Halo Infinite really even is? We know so little about the game that it can be hard to really have a grasp over where the project stands overall. However, I guess this is a long-winded way of saying I really just don't see this as being the kind of end-all be-all that audiences are saying. I think let's first take a look at what the game looks like. Let's wait to see some gameplay, which unfortunately won't probably be until next E3. I just don't see, after the reception to Halo 5's campaign, which was led by Tim Longo, with the kind of 4-player cooperative story that came with Halo 5 that people seem to really, really sour on. I don't see a world in which 343 trusted the same guy again to then lead Halo Infinite, which let's think for a second. This is the game Bonnie Ross said is the spiritual reboot to Halo. This is their way of saying we're continuing the Halo story, but we're totally going to take a step back from Halo 5, look at why you guys didn't like a lot of aspects, and say, how can we not only come back stronger this time, but also reinvigorate the brand in a way that reminds people why Halo is one of the absolute biggest names in gaming history and why it's not just another AAA game. It's something, it's a force to be reckoned with, and it's something that everyone in the gaming sphere should take note of when Halo's happening because it's a big deal. So with that being said, there's no way in hell that this one guy was solely responsible for the entire creative vision and direction of the product, and I just don't see his sole departure as being detrimental to the game overall. Again, I don't know shit about game development, and I could be dead wrong, and maybe this game comes out and is totally rough as hell because they lost some key talent. But again, I just don't see that being the case. And I think really, I don't blame you for having some apprehension over something like this, I just think you should be patient and wait to see how the game looks and just give it some more time before we pass judgment saying that Halo Infinite is screwed as a result of losing this one person. That being said, I wished him the best in whatever he goes on to do next. And at this point, I'm so tired of talking about Halo Infinite in vague terms. It's like we've manifested into existence, what this game is supposed to be without actually really having a concrete understanding of it due to a lack of gameplay footage. So, I'll always be up for talking Halo, but in the same breath, show me this game already. All right, our next story is actually, these are two different stories that happened kind of throughout the week, and I think they kind of work in conjunction together to discuss. The first part of the story, of course, being that during Gamescom, or right before rather, Nintendo held a Indie Direct highlighting a bunch of upcoming games for the Nintendo Switch. And you might be asking, well, this is an Xbox podcast. Why the hell are you talking about Nintendo? Well, during that Switch Indie presentation, the Xbox exclusive Ori and the Blind Forest was announced for the Nintendo Switch as a definitive edition that will be releasing on September 27th. And so this one really threw me for a loop because, up until this point, we've seen these games that are both on Xbox and other platforms, and there's always been an excuse for it. For example, Minecraft was already on pretty much everything before Microsoft bought Minecraft. So why would Microsoft take it away from people by removing it from PlayStation, removing it from Nintendo, whatever? Even I guess it came to Nintendo after Microsoft bought them, but you get the idea. And then, we look at games like Outer Worlds, where it's like, well, Obsidian was well into development of that game before Microsoft bought them. So, of course, they're going to let them release the PlayStation 4 version of the game and not just have them scrap it all together. But, we expect for future installments for future games from Obsidian that they'll be Xbox exclusive, right? Well, this one kind of throws everything for a loop because Ori and the Blind Forest has clearly been out for a number of years already. So they are just re-releasing a game that was very firmly, very concretely an Xbox exclusive onto a competitor's platform, which initially sent that kind of like, I told you so, watch Xbox. They're going to start, really testing where they can put their games because they're really redefining kind of what Xbox can be and where Xbox games can be played. But then shortly afterwards, I think within a day, Microsoft came out and spoke with games industry and basically came out saying that Xbox games aren't going to be showing up on other platforms regularly, at least, especially their big first-party games. So I'm just going to read through this real quick. Some notes I wrote down in a quote. I said, despite the recent shakeups in Xbox games releases due to new studio acquisitions and prior commitments between various Microsoft-owned game studios and other publishers, it appears that players should not expect to see the trend of Xbox games on competitor hardware continuing. Save for the exceptions of games like Minecraft, The Outer Worlds, Pillars of Eternity 2, and other games that are either already in development or for platforms that are that were already in development well before Microsoft purchased them. In a recent report from Games Industry, Microsoft responded by saying, quote, "The past year has been an exciting time for us, and we have been more than doubled our internal creative teams making up Xbox game studios. As these new studios transition in, we are aware of some existing commitments to other platforms and will honor them. However, going forward, these new studios will focus on making games for our platforms. We have no plans to further expand our exclusive first-party games to other consoles, and we continue to believe deeply in cross-play and progression of games with the right flexibility for developers to ensure a fair and fun experience." All right, so I don't know how to break this one down without getting a little conspiracy-driven. So this is my 2 cents. Microsoft doesn't plan on taking your Halos and Forzas and Gears of Wars and putting them on PlayStation and Nintendo. Maybe someday down the road, that is something they're looking into doing. However, for the time being, they're saying if it's like a big Xbox game that is synonymous with Xbox, you can expect it to be Xbox exclusive, which of course includes PC these days. But you're not getting the next Halo on PlayStation. However, when the time calls for it, you might see some smaller games show up on other platforms, and we see that with games like Cuphead or In the Blind Forest, and then of course the exceptions for games like Minecraft, like I just said, when it was already on other platforms before Microsoft bought it. Now, how do you justify something like Cuphead or In the Blind Forest ending up on Nintendo Switch when these games were finished and developed initially only for Xbox and or have since been moved over to Switch? Well, the only thing I can think of is, maybe Microsoft was the one, and this is where I'm getting all conspiracy, big stretch kind of idea, which is that, let's rewind back to last year when Microsoft was all, hey, look at us and Nintendo. We play nice together. Fortnite, it's cross-play. Sony, why aren't you doing this? When they were kind of forcing Sony's hand to make them look bad and to kind of give that good press to Microsoft and also Nintendo by virtue of this kind of partnership. What I almost wonder is if Nintendo had initially said to Microsoft, we're not into this idea of cross-play, cross-platform, and Microsoft kind of had to wean them onto it by saying, hey, we'll be friends, we'll play nice, what's it going to take to get you to let us do this? And maybe they came to a compromise or a deal where Microsoft would agree to release a certain number of Xbox games on Nintendo hardware, which ended up being, some of these smaller, bite-sized indie-type games, like your Cupheads and your or in the Blind Forest and things like that. And that could be an explanation. So Microsoft has been slowly kind of playing it off as like, we're friends with Nintendo. We love Nintendo, and when the game calls for it or when it makes sense to do so, we'll put this game on, this other hardware. The other way to look at this is Microsoft is just straight up lying. So like I said, think about this in terms of next generation, where you think, well, the Xbox Scarlett, games on Xbox Scarlett might be available on every console. But the whole purpose of the Scarlett is to say, this is the most powerful place to play games. This is the platform that supports xCloud and Game Pass and Xbox Live. So we really think this is the premier place to play Xbox games. However, if Nintendo or Sony's hardware and services can accommodate the Xbox experience, which is a powerful gaming machine, Xbox Live, Game Pass, whatever, all those things, then yeah, there's no reason why we won't release our games on their hardware. However, for example, look at Nintendo Switch. What can Nintendo Switch play that is Xbox exclusive? There's no way in hell you're getting Forza Horizon 4 on Nintendo Switch or Halo 5 on Nintendo Switch. It's just not happening. But, you can get Cuphead on there. You can get Or in the Blind Forest, and the experience isn't really compromised because those aren't games that really require Xbox Live. They're not really graphically intensive games that are just vast and require beefier hardware. They're just smaller 2D indie type games. So they work for Nintendo. And so this could maybe be Microsoft's short-term game by saying, for now, this is kind of what we're doing, but don't be surprised in the long run if, Nintendo's next console is up to snuff with the Scarlett and can run it, and Nintendo decides they'll allow Xbox Live and Game Pass on their platform, and then all of a sudden you get Xbox games on Nintendo. Who knows? It's more of Microsoft's way of saying, balls in your court, Nintendo, balls in your court, Sony. Will you allow your next console to be powerful enough and open enough to include our games and our services? Who knows? There's a million ways this could go. I feel like right now, as we reach the end of this current console generation, we're at this juncture where we don't know which way it's going to go, and it's more of a just wait and see kind of thing. But that's why I offer a couple of solutions or a couple of theories as to what could be happening here, because I really don't know, and I think either Microsoft really doesn't know yet, and they're just kind of playing touch and go with it, or they have an end game in mind and they just are trying to market it and feed the consumer in a way that doesn't scare them off or have them doubt the Xbox brand as a whole. They're trying to piecemeal them and slowly feed them onto this idea, which is the future of Xbox, because, an all-at-once approach, as we saw with the reveal of the Xbox One, could potentially scare people away, and that's a common thing that can happen when you are a little too ahead of the curve and a little too visionary. Your audience might not be totally comfortable or on board with where you're going, and that can result in some backlash. So I'll leave it at that. I know it seems like a very messy, out of control kind of story that continues to develop, but it seems like every couple of weeks we're hearing more and more about something like this, so I expect that we will continue to learn more and to see more of what Xbox's overall strategy is going forward. All right, holy crap, that was a long one, and we are barely denting the news. Like I said, this is a big news week, especially with Gamescom. So going to our next one, it appears that Phil Spencer and the team at Xbox have set some high standards for the performance of the next Xbox console, Project Scarlett. As in a recent interview with GameSpot, Spencer said the following, quote, ensuring that the games load incredibly fast, ensuring that the game is running at the highest frame rate possible. We're also the Windows companies, so we see the work that goes on for PC and the work that developers are doing. People love 60 FPS or 60 frames per second, so getting games to run at 4K 60 FPS, I think, will be a real design goal for us. He went on to say, how fast do games load? Do I feel like I can get into the games as fast as possible? And when it's playing, how does it feel? Does this game both look and feel like no other game that I've seen? That's our target, Spencer says. And then another quote he said towards the end of this article I pulled from IGN, he goes in further and says, we really like the reception and the use that we've seen through the Xbox One backwards compatibility program, making sure that all 4 generations of content, so the original Xbox games will run on your Xbox One today, OG Xbox, the 360 will run on your Xbox One, and your Xbox One games and the newer generation of games all run on the next platform is important to us. We want to respect that the games that you have bought from us, we want to make sure that the generations can play with each other. So if you happen to adopt the next generation early and somebody stays back, that if their games are on both platforms, you'll be able to cross-gen play, Spencer explained. So this is, of course, with these Spencer stories, they're a little hit or miss on whether or not they're going to kind of contain new nuggets of information or if they're just going to be kind of a reaffirmation of something Spencer's already said, kind of doubling down on something. And this is a little both, I see, especially with the backwards compatibility stuff. This seems like just kind of restating something he said before. However, with the thing about the 4K 60 FPS, this seems a little new. Obviously, one might expect that is the kind of target performance for a next generation console, but this is Spencer kind of coming out and saying it. It doesn't seem like this is that prevalent of a conversation these days, but if you'll go back to late 2013, early 2014, back when the PS4 and Xbox One first launched, there was a lot of talk about how PS4 games tend to generally run at 1080p, 60 FPS, no problem. A lot of Xbox One games seem to run at like 920p, not quite 1080p. Some of them don't hit the 60 FPS as well because the PS4 is just slightly more powerful than the base Xbox One. And of course, I think that's a lot of what prompted Microsoft to be so aggressive in making the Xbox One X the most powerful console it could be, to kind of overcompensate for the launch of the Xbox One and say, hey, not only are we the most powerful, but we're the most powerful by a long shot. And I think they want to continue to keep that messaging and drive that point home going forward with Project Scarlett. So I would expect the next Xbox to be 4K 60 FPS with 90% of titles. I assume that's what they're going for, is to try to make even the most ambitious projects be able to hit that mark. But this is just really nice to hear Spencer kind of affirm it, because this will, again, Xbox is in this position right now where not only, when you're in second place, when you're not the favored brand, you're in this position where your next console not only has to be impressive in the sense that it has to technologically be able to compete with the other big dog or surpass it, but you're also in this position where you have to make your platform more appealing by comparison of the other, because Sony kind of has their thing cut out for them, right? They're going to come to E3 next year or whenever they announce PS5 formally, and everyone already likes PlayStation because of PS4. So all they have to do is maintain the momentum they built with PS4, which is to say an affordable price or reasonable price for the box. It's all about games, and here are those games you're going to be playing. Gamers first, games. And then Xbox has to do more than that. Xbox can come out on the stage and say, look at the Scarlett. It's just as powerful as the PS5, maybe even more so. We're all about the games. Here are all of our new studios and all the new games they're working on. Look at the Xbox Scarlett, right? It's all about the games. And that could still potentially not be enough for Microsoft because they're in second place. So I see this as kind of a given for Xbox, that this should absolutely be like a default goal for them, is to reach this, because to really impress next generation, they have to do more than just offer what Sony offers. They have to go above and beyond to win people back, to win back that market share of people who had Xbox 360 back in the day that jumped over to PS4 during the current generation. They have to really impress, and I think having something like 60 FPS 4K resolution be the standard for your console should be expected, and I think audiences will be hoping and expecting more from Microsoft if they are to really take the next generation of Xbox as a serious threat and a serious one-to-one competitor for Sony's PlayStation 5. All right, so we're going to do this thing again where the next two stories are kind of interrelated, so let's talk about them in conjunction. And that is that Gamescom 2019, which took place in Germany this week, has been going on, and we have gotten a ton of Gears 5 news. So starting with the first story, Xbox has released a campaign story trailer for Gears 5, which you can easily find online if you look it up. While I won't spoil the details of the trailer for those who wish to go into the story entirely blind, just know that the trailer offers what is most likely the most in-depth look at what the players can expect to play this September when the game releases. And it is probably the most in-depth look at the campaign since the game was initially revealed in E3 2018. Continuing with the Gears 5 announcements, and I'll read this one directly from Xbox Wire. At Gamescom 2019, we revealed that the all-new Gears 5 Horde mode, which adds new gameplay features and ultimate abilities to the signature mode. Every Horde character will have a unique ultimate ability. This extends to crossover characters like Sarah Connor from the Terminator Dark Fate and Kat and Emil from the newly announced Halo Reach Character Pack. The Halo Reach Character Pack is included as part of the Gears 5 Ultimate Edition on Xbox One, Windows 10, and Steam, and with Xbox Game Pass Ultimate. Lastly, we confirmed that Gears 5 is now available for pre-purchase on Steam and will launch on all platforms at the same time. Gears 5 will of course be releasing on September 10th, and Game Pass Ultimate members, buyers of the Ultimate Edition will be able to play the game up to 4 days early. So this was kind of a really fun announcement. So first of all, the campaign trailer, it's about time. The game's out in just a couple of weeks, and we've seen so little on the campaign. That was nice to see. This campaign trailer, I felt like didn't go too deep into what the story beats were, which is fine, but it showed a lot more campaign gameplay, and I was happy with that. The game looks great. I'm super excited for Gears 5. Not much to say there other than, go watch the trailer if you're interested in checking that out. However, Gears 5 Horde mode was a pretty big deal. Some people were wondering if that game mode wasn't going to return. I didn't really doubt that it would because, it's just such a big part of the Gears of War experience. But Horde mode is returning. And to me, the most exciting part of all of that, we knew about the Terminator skin or crossover character. But the big thing for me is the Halo Reach character pack, of course. As a huge Halo fan, this just looks awesome. If you haven't seen it, please go look up the trailer. Please go look at the screenshots. The Cat and Emil skins look amazing. You have their weapons in there. They look awesome. And the cool thing is, as long as you have Game Pass Ultimate, you'll be able to get that. So you don't have to get the Ultimate Edition of the game. And so a lot of people are going to be able to take advantage of this little additional skin. Normally, I don't go in for pre-order bonuses or things like that, but this is just a really cool one. And it doesn't seem like just a cheap skin. It seems like they really went all in bringing those characters into this game and kind of reimagining them for the Gears of War universe. And if you haven't seen screenshots or video of this yet, I must admit, Kat and Emil look quite fitting in the Gears of War universe. So props to the Coalition for pulling that off. Props to 343 for allowing that to happen, and props all around to everyone involved because this looks awesome, and that's definitely going to get me to try out some Horde mode for a game I would otherwise pretty much just play the campaign and move on with. So Gears 5, like I said, launching September 10th. I'm pretty excited for this game now. Between Gears 5 and Control, we're finally getting to that part of the year where like I'm getting excited about the games coming out, and I can't wait to start playing some stuff. Although, as a tangent, I will say I am kind of boycotting Control for a little while until it drops in price to protest their exclusive content that comes with the PlayStation version exclusively and not the Xbox version, despite the fact that the game costs the same amount of money on both platforms. That is bullshit, and I'm tired of supporting that kind of thing. So I'll have to wait till that game drops in price before I can ever play it. But nonetheless, I'm still excited to play Control and Gears 5, as they are the two most prominent games coming up in recent weeks and months. So yeah, Gears 5, I mean, we've talked about it so much on the show lately, but definitely check out that Halo Reach character pack trailer because it looks awesome. Next story, if you're in the market for a new Xbox controller, you just got another two options, as Microsoft has just announced two new controllers releasing this fall. Coming out on October 8th for $70 is the Night Ops Camo Special Edition controller, featuring a darker tone camo look for those of you that are into that sort of thing. The other controller releasing sooner on September 17th for $70 is known as the Sport Blue Special Edition. The controller features grooves and textures to accentuate the unique blue color scheme of the controller. This one looks a lot cooler than the camo one in my opinion, but not as cool as my Halo 5 Spartan Lock controller. So yeah, these two controllers are pretty cool. As far as camo goes, I like the camo one, but I would never buy a camo controller. But you might be into that sort of thing, so be sure to check that out on Xbox Wire or Amazon or the Microsoft Store, as those are going to be available for pre-order soon, as well as be available in the coming months or weeks. The blue special one looks pretty cool. It has a lot of like textures and grooves on it. So if you like those more unique controllers, not just for the color scheme, but for kind of like the accents and in ways they alter the actual controller itself, this one's pretty cool. But yeah, I mean, this isn't big news. I just wanted to throw it in there because Xbox likes to come out with lots of controllers, and I like to pat them on the back for doing so because I love just the sheer creativity and variety available to players. And there's something always fun about just blowing money you don't need to spend on a new video game controller. But yeah, so moving on to our next actual kind of bigger story. It looks like Gears Tactics is coming to Xbox after all. If you were hoping to play Gears Tactics and hate having to play games on PC, you will be in luck, as the Coalition has confirmed that the game will indeed be coming to Xbox, despite some initial concerns that the game would remain PC only. Gears Tactics is an upcoming RTX XCOM-like Gears of War game in development from the Coalition. The game will of course be available on Game Pass when it releases, though no firm dates or extreme details have been released as of yet. This game kind of went dark after it was announced last year, and I'm a little confused as to how that happened, but we're still waiting to hear more. I think this is exciting to know that it's coming to Xbox though, because I'm all for this, everything cross-platform, but the idea of an Xbox game kind of being PC and not Xbox, like console, is just a little weird to me. So I'm excited that they addressed that and they were able to get an Xbox version up and running as well, despite, PC might being a preferred place to play an RTS game. I don't want to play on my PC, so I'm excited that I'll still be able to enjoy Gears Tactics on the Xbox, much like how I play Halo Wars on the console. So that is exciting news for all of you who were looking forward to Gears Tactics and are normal, rational human beings that like to play on a actual video game console. Our next story is that we finally got a gameplay reveal trailer for Disintegration. You may remember this game from a couple weeks or months ago. It was announced by the newly formed studio V1 Studios, which is formed from a lot of ex-Halo and Destiny talent. So my notes read as follows. V1 Studios has finally revealed the first gameplay video for Disintegration. The trailer shows some more cinematic footage before delving into a bunch of gameplay, revealing an FPS with what the studio describes as tons of real-time tactical elements blended in. V1 is co-founded. V1 Studios was co-founded by Marcus Leto, the co-creator of Halo, and the team is comprised by former Halo and Destiny talent. In Disintegration, players will be able to control a grav cycle and shoot stuff up while commanding small squads of units with varying abilities. The game looks somewhat familiar artistically, a lot kind of like Destiny, but mechanically it looks pretty refreshing. The game will feature both a full single-player campaign as well as some yet-to-be detailed multiplayer component, and of course Disintegration will be released sometime next year in 2020. Now, this trailer, I highly recommend you check it out to all you Destiny, Halo fans out there. This game looks really cool. I don't, having finally seen the gameplay footage, I don't think I'm as hyped about it as I initially was when I learned about the game's existence. But there's still a lot more to see. It looks like you're in this like kind of like Ghost or a Sparrow looking thing. Ghost if you're a Halo fan, Sparrow if you're a Destiny fan. It looks kind of like that, but it's more of like a war mech thing. So think Titanfall, but it's like kind of first person shootery, and then you have like this squad of like 3 to 4 units that you can also like kind of control while you do the bulk of the action. So it seems like it's pretty interesting mechanically. We'll see how that kind of unfolds, but I always give props to a studio that's willing to try something new, especially as what I feel games are just becoming consistently more and more kind of samey. Everything just wants to be an open world game or retro art 8-bit style Metroidvania. So it's exciting to see someone kind of take the first-person shooter formula and reinvent it in a way that isn't just making it open world. So we'll keep an eye on Disintegration. What I will say, otherwise, which is just really interesting, is this game screams Destiny. Everything from the character design to kind of the humor that's in the end of the trailer to just, the character's face. Everything about this game screams Destiny. So I assume there's quite a bit of ex-Bungie talent working on this game. But yeah, I mean, this is just exciting. We're starting to see, it's unfortunate as a lot of OG talent leaves 343 and Bungie and kind of goes out to do their own thing, but it's exciting because a lot of these studios are creating these new games that have a little bit of Halo and Destiny DNA baked into them. So if you're a fan of that kind of game, it just seems like there's just so much new stuff being spun out as a result of this talent being spread across the industry. So Disintegration, I'm excited to see more of it. I assume next E3 we'll see a bunch of it. My guess is that it's a fall 2020 game, but please go check out that trailer if you haven't already. If you're into Halo or Destiny or anything like that, you owe it to yourself to just at least be familiar and kind of verse yourself in what this game is, because chances are you're interested in it if you like those kinds of games. All right, our next story is a little bit of a smaller one pertaining to Minecraft. A little update about Minecraft. While last week brought the sad news that the Super Duper Graphics pack had been canceled, this week we learned that Minecraft will be getting support for NVIDIA's ray tracing technology. This will allow for realistic lighting and shadowing, and even more. The feature will come as a free update for PCs that support the NVIDIA RTX graphics cards. And as a result, and the results of this added feature will vary based on your system specs, of course. So this is cool just because, we lost that super duper graphics pack, which is supposed to be on all platforms for Minecraft. But despite that not being, a thing that came to fruition, we're still getting this RTX ray tracing technology kind of thing added into the PC version of the game. Now, my guess is that actually they were using this NVIDIA ray tracing technology in some rudimentary form to make the super duper graphics pack, and so a lot of these things were already on the way for the Switch, Xbox, PS4 version of the game, but when they decided that they wouldn't be able to make it work on everything, including Android, iPhone, Switch, whatever, and decided to scrap the game, it looks like maybe they found a way to get some of those awesome ideas and things they had worked on into the game via, a PC update for the PC version of the game. So it's cool to see that if you were looking to see like a super hyper realistic, fun looking version of Minecraft, that you will be getting this feature, provided that your PC can support it. But yeah, so it's, I don't know, to me, this kind of somewhat salvages the loss that graphics pack was canceled last week. So if you're interested in Minecraft, if you were a little sore about last week's news, hopefully this will cheer you up just a little bit. Our next story is the announcement of a brand new Need for Speed game, which is in development from Ghost Games, who made 2017's Need for Speed Payback. The new game is called Need for Speed Heat and will bring players to Heat City, a new Miami-inspired open world where street racers gather to make their names. The game will feature customization, a full single-player mode, and to sweeten the pot, EA has already promised that there will be no loot boxes in the game. There will, however, be post-launch DLC in the form of card packs and a time-save pack, which will allow you to see on the map where all the collectibles are located. The trailer is out now if you want to take a look. It's a pretty extensive trailer, and I must admit, it looks something like Need for Speed Underground meets Forza Horizon, which, in my opinion, is all good things. So this is kind of exciting news for Need for Speed fans, as I feel like the franchise has kind of just waned a lot in popularity over the years. 2017's Need for Speed was just not very, like, I'm not going to say well received because I'm not too familiar, but it just seemed like there was no buzz around it. It just came and went, and that was that. But, since this game's announcement a couple of days ago, I've just seen the internet, like, kind of talking about Need for Speed in a way I haven't seen in a while. So it just seems like generally, like, the buzz surrounding this game is kind of there, and that people are into what they see so far. So hopefully this is kind of the comeback for Need for Speed. I am a big arcade racing fan, and I love the Forza Horizon series, but it does make me sad a little bit to see something as iconic and classic as Need for Speed really struggle to kind of gain its relevancy back in 2019. So hopefully Need for Speed Heat really, no pun intended, brings the heat, and we can kind of see that franchise kind of regain a little bit of its former glory. If again, this is another example. This is another one of those. If you haven't checked out the trailer, please go do so. Even I, as someone who hasn't played a Need for Speed in a very long time, was pretty impressed with what I saw. I think the game looks great. However, I don't think that I'll be playing it because, of course, I have Forza Horizon 4, which I can just play for free thanks to Game Pass. But that doesn't mean you won't be interested in this game. If you're a big car fan, I think you may find a lot to love here. But yeah. And then just a funny side note, something I saw on Reddit earlier this week. Apparently, Toyota refuses to have their cars in like these kinds of games these days. So Toyota won't have their cars in Need for Speed Heat. And so someone said on I guess on Twitter, it was someone who tweeted out to Toyota, why won't you guys release your games or allow your cars in Forza? And they kind of gave one of those like PR like bullshit like this game promotes illegal street racing and we want like a safe image for whatever. I guess it's not really a PR response, it's kind of a genuine response. They're trying to protect their car's image and brand as like a family brand and not really promote illegal street racing and kind of have their cars associated with that act. And then the official Need for Speed Twitter kind of responded back to Toyota and was just like just called them wimps or something like that for I'm butchering the story now, but it was just kind of a funny tweet if that's something you're interested in looking up. Anyway, that was irrelevant information, so let's just move on to the next one, which is Gears Pop is coming out, and it's actually out today. So remember Gears Pop announced back at E3 2018. It was kind of like the tease. We were waiting for Gears 5 to be announced, and then they teased us by showing us Gears Pop first instead. Well, as of today, this game is now available on iOS and Android. The PvP action game brings the World of Gears of War and the Funko Pop art style together for a free-to-play, pocketable Gears adventure. The game plays similarly to Plants vs. Zombies, which is, of course, a strategy game, and it does offer microtransactions, which you might expect from any free-to-play mobile game. A new Boomer Buddy trailer was released today, was released in addition to this news of the game's release date, and it's actually kind of a fun little short trailer. So check that out if you want to see a little charming kind of like a silent like short in the Gears Funko Pop universe. It kind of, I don't know, maybe that'll help accompany your horde of Gears news that has been released this week. But yeah, the trailer's called Boomer Buddy. It's cute. It's definitely worth the 45 seconds if you want to check that out as well. All right, then two final stories to wrap up. This first one being a real quick one, which is that Age of Empires Definitive Edition, which was announced back at E3, is officially cross-play and is available now on both Steam and Xbox Game Pass. So, if you want to download from Microsoft Store, if you have Game Pass, or if you have Steam on your PC, you can go and play Age of Empires Definitive Edition now. Its sequel, though, Age of Empires 2 Definitive Edition, will be released on November 14th, so we now have a release date for that. And the game will be available on the same platforms, of course, Microsoft Store, Steam, and through Xbox Game Pass. If you have Game Pass, you can save 25% now on Age of Empires 2 through the Microsoft Store by pre-ordering the game. But yeah, I know Age of Empires is a big game. I know a lot of kids play that game growing up, but I never really got into it, and I have no interest in it, so I'm not going to really talk about it because there's literally nothing else to say. That's just some straightforward info for those of you who are interested in such news. But our wrap-up story, our final story, this is actually kind of a not like super important story, but just an interesting one, which is that the Xbox 360 just received a new update. That's right, I did not misspeak. I said a new system update is available for Microsoft's second generation of gaming hardware, which includes minor bug fixes and improvements to your console's overall experience. Whoever the hell you are out there playing games on the Xbox 360, maybe it's time to upgrade to the Xbox One as it approaches its final year of life. But maybe you're trying to play something that isn't backwards compatible yet on your Xbox One, so I'll reserve my judgment there. My guess for this is one of two things. So I'll get the fun one out of the way, which is just that maybe there's like a team of guys at Xbox, newer guys, and they're just like, all right, you're going to work on system updates and features, and we're going to give you a little testing task, which is to work on security and minor bug fixes on the Xbox 360. And if you do well at that, we'll move you up to the Xbox One, the platform that actually matters right now. So maybe that's a thing that happened, but I doubt it. I think what happened is, what's more likely is as these Xbox consoles, become more integrated with one another and kind of blurred. I think what you're seeing is kind of a need for Microsoft to support older hardware in terms of system security and software because of the amount of information that's shared. And so to kind of elaborate and explain that in greater detail, what I mean to say is that, the Xbox One plays Xbox 360 games, and it kind of does so through this like pseudo emulation where your Xbox One thinks it's playing, it thinks it's an Xbox 360 when you're like playing Xbox 360 games. So maybe because of the association of your same Microsoft account that was on your 360 is on your Xbox One, and you're playing 360 content on your Xbox One when you play backwards compatible games, maybe to some extent that means, you have sensitive information associated with your old Xbox 360 that is now somehow able to access information via your Xbox One, since those generations are so closely associated due to the nature of backwards compatibility. And perhaps this is Xbox's way of saying, we still need to provide, they called it minor system updates, bug fixes, but I almost wonder if it's security updates, if it's their way of saying, we need to improve the security of the Xbox 360 because as we start to neglect it and kind of let it go as we move on to newer generations, it becomes more susceptible to hacking and kind of jailbreaking and things like of that nature. So by keeping the security on that console up to date and modern, we're able to keep people out of hacking into the Xbox 360 and gathering user information, therefore allowing them to gather information on Xbox One owners due to the kind of backwards compatibility of varying Xbox consoles. And it's a little bit of a long-winded one, but I almost wonder if that's the issue, is that Xbox has kind of backed themselves into this wall now where they have to continuously provide security and bug updates for older generations of hardware in order to keep this backwards compatibility system they have playing nicely. I do wonder how Xbox backwards compatibility will work on the Scarlett, especially for Xbox One games playing on Scarlett, because I don't think this kind of licensing like emulation thing they made up for old Xbox and 360 games to work on Xbox One. I don't believe that's the system they want to use going forward. So I almost wonder if there will be the appropriate hardware and licensing in the Xbox Scarlett to allow it to just be an Xbox One without the need for severe emulation, and that way they can work around the whole having to add games to backwards compatibility and the whole, kind of close nature of your new Xbox still being so deeply tied back to old Xbox hardware. But those are things we'll learn more about as we learn more about what Scarlett is and as we get our hands on it moving into next fall, of course. And with that, we're going to be finished with this week's news. That was, like I said, a pretty long one. Normally we end an episode around the 45-minute mark. By the time of this recording right now, I've already hit the 50-minute mark without even getting into the kind of final segments of the show. So, of course, we're going to shoot through the games of the week that are releasing. So we're going to go through this a little quicker than usual, just for the sake of saving everyone's time and because at this point, who really gives a shit about my sarcastic remarks? But we do have 12 new games coming out this week. So we'll start off with Pirates of the First Star, which releases on August 19th. And what's substantial about this game is you play as a pirate squid looking into the water, but it looks like claymation. So this is basically like some Moana Pirates of the Caribbean wannabe knockoff. Literally no idea what the gameplay is like, although the game looks stupid, so don't play it. Remnant from the Ashes is our second game of the week. Now, this is a hacky slashy game where you play as a boy with a sword and you fight against demons with axes. The funny thing about this screenshot is all the demons are like in midair, like a midair jump, while they're attacking the main character on the ground, which leads me to believe in this world all goblins and creatures float and have floating and flying abilities, which is fucking creepy. But that game's out on August 20th, so you can already play that. Our next game is called Rad. It is Xbox One X enhanced, although the character on the screen that I'm looking at is so incredibly horrendously ugly that I wish it was Xbox One D-enhanced so I wouldn't have to see her ugly face. All right, our next game is called Rex Rocket, which looks like a 2D, 8-bit, art style, Mega Man knockoff, something or other, which I don't give a shit about because that's all any game ever is these days. Oh my god, buy Nintendo Switch. It's so cool. Indie games are awesome. The next game on our list is called Smoot's Summer Games. This basically looks like a 2.5D remake of this beautiful combination of Excite Bike, Rayman Raving Rabbids, and Mario and Sonic at the Olympic Games. And that's fucking awesome. I'm going to highly recommend this game to everyone and anyone. So you're going to play as these tiny little, like, little smushy small soldier thingies. They look like little collectible toys, plushes, and they compete in these Olympic Games, likely due to the fascist nature of the country they reside in, where everyone is competing for resources. And so the Olympics works as an allegory for fascism. All right, the next game here is all in black and white. It's called Pato Box. It's WarioWare. I think this is a WarioWare game, pretty much. I think they're just releasing WarioWare on Xbox. And then the game after that is called Mechabolt. I was so excited to play this game when I first heard about it earlier this week. Apparently, you play as like a theme park operator, ride ops manager, and then like the world becomes taken over by robots and you have to go fight and stuff. But it's like another 8-bit 2D side platformer Metroidvania type looking thing. Puzzles. So tired of it. So tired of it. I have no enthusiasm left for these kinds of games. I know they're so cool and we love them and we buy them all, but I personally am just drained of my energy and have nothing to say about those. Our next game is called Gift of Parthax. And while I will say I can't understand a single thing I'm looking at on the screen, this sure as hell looks like a Nintendo DS game meets RuneScape. There's a mage man in a robe with lightning, and there's some like fish skeletons flying, and I just don't have it in me. Next game, Life is Strange 2, Episode 4. This is actually pretty cool. I really need to play Life is Strange 2. If you haven't seen it yet, shameless plug, I did a really exhaustive kind of analytical video on the awesome adventures of Captain Spirit, which is in the Life is Strange universe, which you should absolutely check out on my YouTube at Second Best Gaming. However, Life is Strange 2 Episode 4 is out this week. It's out today, actually, so go ahead and play that if you're following these games. I'm not going to tease this game because I actually really like Life is Strange despite the awful campy writing that the series is known for. They somehow still make the game so engrossing and the story is so interesting and the characters so likable despite their awful personalities and awful writing. So definitely check that out if you haven't played the Life is Strange games. I highly recommend starting with the first one. You can get it for like next to nothing these days. It might even be on Game Pass. Just do yourself a favor and play that game because it is an awesome kind of adventure Telltale style game. But it's way better than a Telltale game, so I don't mean to insult it in that regard. Coming out tomorrow is a new game called Gnome's Garden Lost Kingdom, but the screenshot is just a picture of a map. If you want to sell your game, don't show us a picture of the overworld map. Maybe show us a picture of the game. You don't want to sell your game if that's what you're going to show for your screenshot, so I'm not going to waste my time talking about it. How does that work? All right, our next game is called Strength of Sword Ultimate. This basically is like Luigi's Mansion, but with like a more realistic, or not realistic, but more of like a medieval looking art style. There's a lot of green in this game. There's like a green glow to everything, which leads me to believe that when the art creators were making this a game in MS Paint, they ran out of all the red and blue and yellow, and they just had to use green. So the whole game is going to look green, but that wasn't because they wanted to make it that way. That's just because MS Paint ran out of all the other colors. All right, and so now we get into our final game of the week, which is Path of Sin, Greed. And this is a screenshot of like a booth and there's a football and a chair, and it looks really artsy and dark and Tim Burton-esque, and for that, I'm not going to give it the time of day. However, I will mention that game comes out tomorrow, August 23rd, so, if you want to play it today, you're a fucking idiot, because it's not even out yet. So, how about that? You look so stupid for saying you were going to play that game today, because you can't do that. Idiot. Okay, our next thing is the Games of Gold. So just as a final reminder for the month of August, your games are Gears of War 4 for the rest of the month, of the remaining days. If for whatever reason you don't have that game, you haven't downloaded that game, just do yourself a favor and play Gears 4. It is my favorite Gears of War game, and it's a good way to prep yourself for Gears 5. Through September 15th, you've got Forza Motorsport 6, which is also an excellent sim racing game if you're into more like nerdy racing games. If not, just download it anyway. Get yourself some gamer score. Torchlight is no longer available for download, but the other Xbox 360 game of the month, Castlevania Lords of Shadows, is available for the remainder of August, so be sure to get that if you need yet another Metroidvania game in your life. Yeah, you can download that. And that's going to do it for all that junk. To wrap up this week's what I've been playing kind of segment, I'll be real honest, I've been so incredibly overwhelmed and busy this week. I have not had time to play games, which hurts because I've been wanting to play games so badly all week. So I tried to play a little bit more of Wolfenstein Youngblood, and I think I'm just going to give up on that game because it really sucks and it's not worth my time, and I'm just going to take the L of the $30 that I spent on it and move on and play something that is worth my time. So while I wait for Gears 5, I think I'm going to go start Metro Exodus. While I wait for Gears 5 to come out, I think I'm going to go play Metro Exodus. But until then, that's kind of where I am with gaming right now. But I'm excited for this week as I will be able to start playing some more games. All right, and that's going to do it for this week's episode of Xbox On. As always, thank you so much for listening. If you made it all the way to the end of the episode, please rate the show on iTunes. And if you haven't already, please rate the show on iTunes. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and rate the show on iTunes. And if you haven't already, please tell your ex-lover about this show. This show was rated the #1 podcast in the world by follow me on Instagram at Real T-Pain. Bye.